Coming up on Mac Break Weekly, I, Mikah Sargent, am in for Leo Laporte this week, and we've got a great show planned for you. We've got Andy Ihnatko, we've got Alex Lindsay, and we've got Renee Ritchie, and we kick things off by finally getting the lowdown on Andy's opera costume. Then we talk about some new announcements from Apple, including its new Beats Fit Pro, those HomePod Mini that come in multiple colors, Apple's earnings, and so much more, including a large discussion about the App Store and the value of apps. Stay tuned for Mac Break Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Mac Break Weekly, episode 790, recorded Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021, night at the opera. This episode of Mac Break Weekly is brought to you by Wealthfront. To start building your wealth and get your first $5,000 managed for free for life, go to wealthfront.com/MacBreak. And by userway.org. Userway ensures your website is accessible, ADA compliant, and helps your business avoid accessibility-related lawsuits. The perfect way to showcase your brand's commitment to millions of people with disabilities. It's not only the right thing to do, it's also the law. Go to userway.org/twit for 30% off Userway's AI-powered accessibility solution. And by Coinbase. Cryptocurrency might feel like a secret or exclusive club, but Coinbase believes that everyone, everywhere should be able to get in the door. Whether you've been trading for years or just getting started, Coinbase can help. For a limited time, new users can get $10 in free Bitcoin when you sign up today at coinbase.com/MacBreak. It's time for Mac Break Weekly. I am in for Leo Laporte today. Very excited to be joined by the three gentlemen who are here to talk to you all about the Apple news and everything in between, and occasionally offer some tech support advice, popcorn picks, and lots of nerdy, geeky wonder. Up first, it's WGBH's Andy Ihnatko. Hello, Andy.
Hello, Mikah. Sorry that Leo's not here, but you are an affable and wonderful surprise for us this week.
Well, I am happy to be here with you all. We've also got Alex Lindsay here joining us. Of course, Office Hours, Hello. 090 Media. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing well. Doing quite well.
Excellent. You're coming in quite clear, and you sound great. You look great, per usual. We're all a little jealous.
Well, the funny thing is, Office Hours, I'm kind of middle of the road. I just try to keep up with everybody else. So it's a hard set of Joneses to keep up with.
I'm trying to imagine what's after. Is it hologram that's above you? I can't imagine.
This week we started testing streaming Office Hours in high dynamic range. So we're streaming at HDR10 to YouTube as a test. And we suddenly realized we're going to have to redesign all of our backgrounds because some of them look amazing and some of them don't look so good. And so we were like, oh, this created a whole new set of problems, which is like designing sets for HDR turns out to be harder than we expected. So that you can, That's why I have more blue color in my background as I was trying to see what would happen there. But I'm going to have to rethink the whole thing. So it's quite a thing.
Well, you're going to have to redo the whole thing for the metaverse anyway. So, I mean,
yeah, exactly.
It's timely.
I'm so excited. Yeah,
you don't want to look like a ne'er-do-well or something. Not having a metaverse plan.
I know.
Joining us from the wilds of Canada is Renee Ritchie, youtube.com/Renee Ritchie. Welcome, Renee. I mean, you've got a background ready for HDR.
I do. And at first, as much as I miss Leo, I do love my Micah Break weeklies. They are, always special to me. But don't let Alex fool you, because he came on my show last week and he made me look pixelated. He was all 7K, black magic, raw, boom. And then he explained how it worked. That's the thing. Like, he'll come in looking better than you and then explain how compression and everything else works to make him better than you. It's amazing.
Fantastic. Well, I actually want to start off this week with a very important update, some follow-up. A certain person on this show continued over and over and over to tease us about going to the opera wearing a costume and not revealing too many secrets. And so I am curious to hear about Andy Ihnatko's opera
pictures
visit.
The real
How did that
book
go?
of Boba.
Yeah. Well, it's on my Instagram if you want to see it. I attended a performance of the Metropolitan Opera, Turandot, as it were, with Christine Gerke, one of my favorite sopranos, dressed in a Boba Fett costume. I felt as though the time was right. I don't know if I was the first to ever attend the Met Opera as Boba Fett, but I was definitely the most recent. And yeah, it was something that I thought of like about a month ago when I realized that my tickets for Halloween weekend, because I was joking with a couple of friends of mine that I should wear that ThinkGeek.com Boba Fett like blazer that you've seen on my I wore it once on the show like last year. It's just a green blazer with like a little tiny little Mandalorian crest on it. I said, yes, I should wear that to the Met. And then a month ago I just thought that, hey, actually it's Halloween. And I'm going to have to wear a mask anyway because of like the mask and vaccine protocols. And I kind of thought, how much of a Boba Fett costume could I put together so that I would look, so the people who are not very hip would just think, oh, he's dressed interestingly. Whereas anybody who's familiar with the character would go, dude. So I think I hit it. I made it the only non off the shelf clothing item that I incorporated was I had to make the sunglasses because I felt as though if I were just wearing like red framed glasses, that would be a cop out. I also made like I figured out how to get the actual armor in there. You know, there's on the breastbone part of the armor is like a separate sort of like diamond sort of thing. So I bought like a replica of a casting of that, painted it up and made it like battle scarred and everything and wore it as a pendant. Unfortunately, it's like slid off to the side there. But yeah, it was a lot of fun because for every single one of like the biggest like Boba Fett costume elements, I was trying to figure out how can I represent this or quote this or incorporate this without necessarily actually wearing like a blaster jetpack or without actually having to have like forearm blasters. So when I realized that, actually I could just like put like warmers of the right color on my forearms and that'll work. And then if I wear like gray gloves and if I have a gray blazer, it will kind of it'll get the effect of it's an entirely like gray flight suit he's wearing. I'm wearing matching gray slacks underneath that. For the helmet, the helmet was the difficult part because again, I can't walk in wearing a Boba Fett helmet. I could, there's a really great Instagram account called Last Night at the Met where there's a photographer who like looks for people who are dressed sort of extra, and normally we mean by extra that they're dressing like they're presenting an award like at the 1984 Oscars, and you're wearing the dress that Cher rejected as being a little bit too much. But we're not talking about like science fiction cosplay. So I realized that the helmet was the hardest part, and I realized that, okay, how about if I wear like a Kangol cap, like a wool cap about the right color, and then I've got the glasses, and then one of the running stories in this development was putting together something or selecting something that was too dead on and then realizing I could dial it back a little bit. So I did buy commercially. You can buy, face masks, like breathing masks that are actually printed to look like the lower half of the Boba Fett or Mandalorian helmet. And then I had it on. I decided that that's too on the nose. I look like a dude who decided to buy some stuff and put it on. What really tied it all together was when I came up with my own like little rule book and rule story about it, which is the look that I'm going after is like, imagine that the Boba Fett character has been written but hasn't been like designed yet. It's still like early in the production of Empire Strikes Back, and the costume designer at Lucasfilm hasn't decided what the look is going to be. He has all the notes. He goes out to the Metropolitan Opera. He sees someone who just went out dressed the way that he wanted to dress and thought, wow, that color palette, the elements of that, I think that's like 60% of what I want that character to look like. So he took a picture and then he reinterpreted what this person was dressed like as the costume. So that was every single rule that I had. The other part was that as I was like acquiring like normal clothing, like I found the right jacket that I wanted, but then it arrived and it fit so beautifully and I liked it. I liked it so much that I discarded the idea of, yes, I know you spent like $11 on this beautifully embroidered patch of the Fett family crest. You intended to sew it like on the into the jacket, but it's too nice a jacket. Let's just like not have the family crest on there, could we? So I might revisit this. There's a last Comic-Con of the year is on Saturday for this one, or maybe PAX East on March. I might continue to develop it and like fix things that I wish I could have fixed if I had more time, because I think I'm not the sort of person, certainly not the sort of build that can really pull off who would feel comfortable wearing Boba Fett armor. Whatever your body is, whatever your costume is, by all means go for it. I wouldn't feel comfortable dressing as Boba Fett, but I like the idea of walking around Comic-Con thinking that, oh, that person must be a presenter because he's wearing a jacket and tie. And then when they get closer, that son of a just wearing like a normcore Boba, that son of a so
well,
I'm very, very happy. I did get my picture took a couple times. I did not get thrown out even once. So on that basis,
there
definitely
you go.
A success.
You succeeded, and I think, the sort of look you were going for pulled off entirely. I was waiting for the Instagram. I was happy to see it there. All right, let us move on to the Apple news. The first thing I wanted to talk about, Renee, I saw you got a chance to check out, I believe, Apple's new Beats Fit Pro. These are the kind of Beats side of the AirPods headphones, and apparently they are perhaps better than the AirPods 3, the new generation of AirPods. What are your thoughts on these Beats Fit Pro?
Well, first, I would show them to you, but a mutual acquaintance who I will not name, but his name Georgia Dowd, stole them from me yesterday because she said they were pink. They were lavender. They were purple, stone purple or something was the official color. And she just took them and left. So I can't point them out to you, but I did use them for about a week and they are really good. They're more analogous to the AirPods Pro because they have active noise cancellation, transparency mode. They do all of that as well. $200, so they're more expensive than AirPods 3, not quite as expensive as the AirPods Pro. No inductive charging case, so they're saving a little bit of money on there. But what they have, instead of the stems on the side, they have a little wing that goes up and secures under the top of your ear as well. So they basically have 2 points of contact, and that's where the fit part of the name comes in because they stay in place way better. Like I famously have jujitsu mangled ears and everything falls out. Like the left ear is better. The right ear falls out a lot. AirPods Pro are okay, but those were the best fitting buds I've ever used. And they're still light and they still have pretty much every feature of the H1 chip. So they pair, they propagate, they do everything AirPods Pro do, just without the inductive charging case and $50 cheaper.
Now, are they bassy? Are they sort of the Beats sound profile?
No, the Beats got sort of toned that down. They got amplified several years ago. I think when Jimmy Iovine and Dre were escorted out, they forgot about Dre basically, and they've made them much more balanced. Like they still have a different quality than the AirPods. The AirPods are really jack of all trades. Like they're meant to sound good no matter what you're doing. Music, TV, talk, everything like that. The AirPods are, I'd say, a little bit more music focused. You can talk. The microphones are really good, but they're a little bit more musical, so a little bit more bass, a little bit more high end, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, coming in at $200 and offering most of the same features that the AirPods Pro have is a really good price point there. Yeah,
I do a green accent.
Of course they did. Those are the ones I was eyeballing. They don't have the stem that sticks down, which we had seen some early rumors about Apple's next version of the AirPods Pro. One of the things that they were kind of struggling with was having good microphone quality despite the fact that they don't have a stem. So it's interesting to hear what you were saying about kind of sound quality for speaking on phone calls with these, given that may be what Apple's experimenting with the next version of AirPods Pro.
And we saw that with the Beats Studio Buds. Like the Beats Studio Buds are essentially just the tops of the AirPods Pro, and I have them here. These are really neat because they do lack the stem, but they're impossible to get out because they lack the stem, but they really are just these tiny little stemless buds that go right in your ear. And I like to think that the shotgun aspect of the stem really helps the microphone, but I did a test in my latest video. I did a test with the AirPods 3, AirPods Pro, the Beats Studio Buds, and the Beats Fit Pro. And why are all these names so complicated? I don't know.
Exactly.
And they all sound roughly analogous. So I don't think you lose anything by losing the stem. The stem is just nice because absent the stem, you have to do that Beats button thing where you're pushing in your ear like the original AirPods. I find that hella annoying. So just squeezing the the stem, I find is a much more civilized approach from a, sorry.
I much prefer that
Better
force,
from a
the
civilized
force
age.
press to the tap. Now, Alex, I would like to hear some follow-up actually from all of you gentlemen. These, of course, have the spatial audio feature. Have you, Alex, been listening to spatial audio for music? I'm sure you've been doing it with different shows, but I'm curious if you've given the music any more of a try, and kind of what are your thoughts right now with spatial audio, particularly given your experience doing video conferencing. Renee had just talked about how there's going to be some spatial audio and FaceTime coming up. Do you think that would be a great experience for office hours?
That already exists in Blue Jeans. Blue Jeans has it in video conferencing, and they kind of spread you out a little bit, and it actually makes it a little easier to understand who's speaking when, because it does now. It kind of randomly decides who those people are and where they are in your kind of spatial area. But if you have a recent MacBook, even it'll sound like they're in different places, which is really fascinating. I think that from the music perspective, the spatial makes a huge difference for me. I've had the opportunity to listen to a lot of it, and for a couple years before Apple did that, and so I think that once you start getting used to it. What it does is it gives you more places for those instruments to go. Now, one thing that Apple's doing beyond just supporting spatial is they're kind of faking spatial. So they're actually doing a bunch of processing to even stereo. So if you have regular stereo, they're actually still doing some processing that kind of creates more of a space. So what I have found is that if I'm listening to something on just stereo, it really sounds flat now compared to what is coming out of Apple Music, because they're kind of really expanding all of it, even this regular stereo. Then when you have the spatial applied to it, when they're actually mixed for spatial, it just, to me, it sounds a lot more full, and it sounds like the instruments are a lot further apart. So my mind can kind of hear them. They can hear the cymbals better, and they can hear this little, some other little triangle or something else that's been placed somewhere else that I couldn't hear before. It was just kind of part of what was mixed into right or left, and now there's just a lot more places to put it. And so I think that, we've been starting to play a lot with Logic's new, Apple released, of course, Logic with spatial audio, and we're starting to play with it a lot, and it's pretty amazing. It doesn't work, by the way, as a note, if you have an M1 Mac Mini, your AirPod Pros and your AirPod Maxes will just hear mono if you're listening to it. Yeah, like it. So it works perfectly in my. They went completely the other way, because I was super excited, and I opened up Logic and I started playing with Logic, and I started trying to move things around. I was like, wow, I want this to work, but it doesn't really sound like it's working. Maybe
I was worried that there was for that.
Yeah, but it was like I was like,
because they can't tell where they don't know where the screen is. The same problem they had with the Apple TV at first is they didn't, like, you could have it in a closet, you could have it in front of the TV, you could have it across the room. So they couldn't count on the position of the box to determine where the spatial audio should be. So what they started doing with the Apple TV, and I think they're going to do with the Mac Mini, is they start to see which way you're staring most of the time, and then they assume that what you're looking at is the display, and then they make FaceTime does this really well. FaceTime group calls now, then they just assume that's the display. That's the center for your spatial audio.
If you put regular headphones in, it works great. So it's just a view. But if you have the ones that are positioned, and I have to admit that I've learned, I do a lot of testing because a lot of my work is in Atmos, and so I test streams all the time, and I'm looking at stuff in spatial, and the thing that took me a long time to get used to is I'd have my AirPods on testing them, and I'd be looking at my iPad, and I'd turn away, and then I think, oh no, there's something wrong with the left channel. And I look back, and then I look back, now it's fine. Oh no, it's broken. It's fine. It's broken. And so the first couple of weeks, your brain is discombobulated by that process. But anyway, I think it's going to continue to be a big deal.
Yeah.
I had that same experience. Oh, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, no. I think you and I were about to say the exact same thing. That's the thing that really just screws with me when it comes to spatial audio. That there are times where I don't necessarily want to be having an experience where you have an AM radio that's located here inside your office, and here's where all the sound is coming from. I like the idea that when I'm wearing headphones, the sound is relative to wherever my head is. So that's that's the thing that kind of, I like the idea of sitting comfortably in a chair and hearing a more dynamic audio field with spatial audio. I don't like the idea that I kind of feel as though I have to turn my head to feel as though I'm listening and focusing on this one person. The other thing, actually, before I let you continue, the other thing is that, like, I have a hearing loss in this ear and much stronger hearing in that ear. That's a problem. If I turn this way, I'm used to in conversations sitting so that my good ear is facing the conversation. It would be a problem for me if now I have to like sit at my desk like this, because that's kind of the only way to make sure that I have to make sure that I stay focused in the sound field. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really love spatial, and I've grown to not really like the inertial part of it. You know, so it doesn't need to be. You don't need the inertia to have spatial. You know, it could just be spatial, whichever way you're looking. And you know, like if my house, my living room is 7:1, and you know, no matter where I turn my head, it's still coming from where it's coming from. So I think that it's anyway. So I think that. I think I'd rather leave it in spatial and not have the inertia than with it, because I find it is more problematic than useful most of the time.
Yeah,
I agree. It's one of those things that I turn off the head tracking part of it and just leave on the spatial audio part of it. And
that's what I've come to do. It took me a long. I kept on thinking I was going to get used to it, and then I just never did. Turned it off. I was like, okay, I don't need that.
Folks, we've got
good job. Love the effort. Love your energy, but no, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, there you go. It was a cool feature at first. It was fun to try it out, but we're going to let it go.
The spatial though is amazing.
Still.
The actual spatial, even just adding reverb. That's what I've been playing with. Just adding reverb to a regular track. It just feels bigger because it now feels like it's coming from around you. So it really takes very little to really feel it expand.
All right, we're going to take a quick break before we talk about even more. This is, of course, Mac Break Weekly. I'm in for Leo Laporte this week. I want to tell you about Wealthfront, who are bringing you this episode of Mac Break Weekly. Stonks, rocket ships, day trading can be a lot of fun. But if you want to grow your long-term wealth and make it to the moon, well, you should open up a Wealthfront investment account today. The odds are not in your favor if you're doing it alone. You probably know that. You got to team up with Wealthfront instead. Investing can be complicated, but whether you're a beginner or you've been investing for years, Wealthfront makes it easy. They've got the right tools for every portfolio. After answering just a couple of questions, Wealthfront can create a portfolio of globally diversified, low-cost index funds personalized just for you in minutes. You can also build your own portfolio with clean energy funds, crypto trusts, tech, and hundreds of other investments. Wealthfront even offers a socially responsible portfolio, which is a mix of funds built around human rights, climate change, sustainability, and diversity. No manual trades, no picking stocks, no watching the stock market every day. They automatically handle all the investing based on preferences you control. And if you don't want to spend hundreds of hours trying to lower your tax bill, well, don't worry, because they'll help you do that. Not sure how to rebalance your portfolio or even what rebalancing is? Well, they do that automatically. Wealthfront is trusted with more than $27 billion in assets, helping nearly 500,000 people build their wealth. You can get your first $5,000 managed for free by going to wealthfront.com/MacBreak. All you need is $500 to get started. Grow your wealth the easy way and let Wealthfront do the work for you. To start building your wealth and get your first $5,000 managed for free for life, go to wealthfront.com/MacBreak. That's wealthfront.com/MacBreak to start building your wealth. Again, that's wealthfront.com/MacBreak and get started today. MacBreak, MacBreak. Thanks so much to Wealthfront for sponsoring this week's episode of Mac Break Weekly. We're back from the break, and we got a lot to talk about, but I want to talk, first of all, this is a quick mention. Apple announced that the HomePod was going to be coming out in some new colors. Renee, did you get review units of the new colors? Are they tuned differently depending on what color you get?
No, this doesn't sound more orange. It just looks more orange, and it was perfect for Halloween embargoes as well. It just
and also for your branding, yeah?
Yeah, I think which I should hold it on this side though, so it looks it's more contrasty. That's what the kids say, I think.
I keep wanting to light it. It looks like a decorative candle.
Yes, well, I think the smell wouldn't be as good as the incense that you might get off something from Bed Bath and Beyond. But
excellent point.
The only issue is that it's really weird because like we're just talking about the Beats Fit Pro. Those have purple and green options, where these have orange and yellow and blue options. And I feel like, did they split the colors up? Could they not just do all colors for all things? Did they make them choose? It's so odd to me. I want purple, and I know you want green.
I do. I want green. If they would have done, because the whole time I'm saying, look, the HomePod, I just want it to fade into the background. So the black and the white makes sense.
Yes.
Space gray and the white makes sense.
Yeah.
But if they came out with a green one, my silly self would definitely buy a green one. But I do wonder sort of, I was talking, I can't remember, I was just the other day, I was talking kind of, it's not that I need it to be logical or that I need it to make sense, but I wish I could just clandestinely join Apple's marketing team so that I could hear the internal reasoning behind their different color choices. And as soon as I heard the answer, I'd be like, okay, 2 weeks, got to see you later. I just want to know, like I said, it doesn't have to make sense, but like, why are all the watches this year in odd colors? There's no just sort of standard normal color with the watch this year. And so, yeah, go ahead. You were talking about SKUs.
No, there's two issues. Those are actually two little separate issues. One is they always try to predict what the hot colors are going to be. Some year they end up picking what ends up being like Pantone's color of the year. They have like, I forget her name. I'm totally blanking on her name, but they have one of the industrial design department members. She just focuses on color. And that's famously where Johnny said, no, that looks like frat house carpeting. We're not going to go with that orange. So like they have those really pretentious discussions, but they just come up with all the colors, and then marketing decides how much demand there is. And for some products, they know there's going to be a ton of demand, so they can make every single color, and then they balance how many of each they produce, because usually silver or white and black or space gray are by far the most popular colors. Everything else they have to sort of demand forecast, and then they try to see if like 2 colors sell, we'll try 5, and if 5 sell, maybe we'll try all of them, or maybe one will be a spring color, like there'll be a purple HomePod, like there was a purple iPhone last spring. So they try to, it's a whole bunch of different marketing levers that they can pull to make sure they don't have like a color nobody buys, but also have like a color when a product is not getting another update and suddenly it looks fresh because they painted it.
Yeah. It's kind of odd that a lot of companies haven't really decided to have a colorway that is just simply primed metal or primed surface. When you go shopping for like built-in speakers or patio speakers, oftentimes even major manufacturers, they will sell an option that is simply, you get your black, you get your gray, you get your whatever, or we will sell you an unprimed speaker grill, and your decorator or yourself can paint it whatever color is going to match your decor. So wouldn't it be interesting if there were a way that they could sell a housing, or even if it was a clip-on that simply says, it'll accept whatever Krylon paint, whatever Home Depot spray paint you want, because it is kind of insulting to say we won't sell this in this frat house color. Well, maybe I like frat house colors. I have no taste, but it's my house. So I'm sorry, Johnny, unless you want to pay to redecorate.
You can,
exactly.
You can paint anything
cigarette
with
butt and beer cap camouflage.
Yeah, Alex, I think we're both going to take the fabric covering off of our HomePod Minis and dye it.
You can paint. You can make anything you want. We just finished dyeing, or I don't know. We haven't. We can dye anything. My Roblox got turned off, and my daughter started painting rocks. Roblox is gone. She's really good at it.
Yeah, I thought about your daughter whenever the Roblox, because you mentioned that she's like an interior decorator on the game, and I saw that it was down for a while, and I thought, oh no, Alex Lindsay. So I was wondering, what do you do when Roblox is down? Apparently you paint rocks.
She painted like 12 rocks, and really it was so well done that I have to admit, like with my kids, if they show any interest or capacity to something, I just go, well, what can I get you? Like how can we fuel this? And so I bought like, I think 2 collections, like thick and thin of these acrylic pens and a magnifying glass with the light in it, everything else. So she's all set up now. So I said, talk to your aunt. Your aunt makes a living on Etsy. So you talk to your aunt. Here's your stuff, and then I just get out of the way. So it's, hopefully she'll be able to pay for her college. That's the big plan.
Well, I guess we're going to start up a bespoke HomePod mini decorating Etsy.
I think I should hand her one and have her, once she gets a little into this, maybe I'll just give her one of my little HomePods minis and have her paint it, and then we'll show it on MacBreak. I'll let her.
I would
have
love
some fun
that.
with it.
That'd be cool.
Like Kosanki eggs.
Yeah.
I do wonder about the acoustic transparency of acrylic paint, though. We might have a problem there. What were you saying, Andy?
I know. Actually, that sounds like a really interesting Etsy shop where I will send you something and please put your wonderful little style on it. I don't know if I. True.
Shoes are a big deal. There's a whole shoe thing where people paint their shoes or paint other people's shoes.
And they get sued by Nike.
There's that.
That's only if you include human blood in the shoe. That's the only.
I wasn't going to go there, Micah Sargent, but thank you for bringing that home.
Big no.
Yeah, sorry, but
damn bureaucracies. They're trying to control our freedoms. It's just not right. It's just not right.
Okay, let's move on. We've got still so much to cover. One of the things because of course Apple earnings will be coming up. We'll be talking about that shortly. But I did want to talk, Renee. I think you're a good person to talk to anytime these issues come up, because one, it's interesting to hear if you have experienced them, what you can do with them, but also kind of what you've heard and who you've talked to about it. On 9to5Mac, they reported this issue about apps having this application memory error. The thing pops up and it says, your system has run out of application memory. And then it shows you a bunch of different apps and it says, quit any applications you aren't using. Now, one of the interesting things about this is, first of all, in it, the application memory is kind of high. Mail was taking 56.4 gigs of memory, and then Final Cut Pro, which I'm less surprised about, was taking 24.2 gigs of memory. Now, interestingly, at first it seemed like it was an Apple Silicon thing, but later on, as more people were starting to talk about it, it seemed to be that Intel and Apple Silicon Macs were both experiencing this issue. I'm curious, had you seen this thing popping up on your own devices? Did you see it kind of out in the wild? And what do we know about what's going on here?
Yeah, so I haven't seen it, but I have seen people who have seen it. So I have secondhand seen it. Mail is one. It's basically like a memory leak. Like there's some error that's causing the memory to just grow and grow and grow and grow. I've seen it with Adobe, which is probably not a big surprise. Adobe After Effects is trying to go M1. They have a beta, but they're also in Rosetta. And I've seen astronomical amounts of memory being consumed. And these are people with like 64 gigabyte M1 Max systems. So it's not a lightweight by any stretch of the imagination. And because it's on Intel, like maybe it's like a really weird Monterey bug that's causing it, or some interaction between those apps, or just the way that Monterey is handling memory in general. There was another one this weekend. I don't want to get off on a side tangent, but it does relate, where a bunch of people in Canada woke up an hour late for school, for work, because their iPhones and their Android phones were suddenly on the wrong time. And that's famous. iOS has had this problem famously since 2012, and Android occasionally as well. But this wasn't Apple. This was like Bell had done it. And it turns out there's like 3 different ways your phone checks for time, and some of them fail over. And, there's a complexity of modern software where it's not everyone has a problem. It's the unique interaction of your circumstances that cause these problems. So Mail is fine for me. I don't use After Effects. Final Cut is fine for me, but there are definitely people experiencing this. So I'm anticipating a Monterey patch.
I thought it was something that I was doing, to be honest. like I definitely was like, well, I must be not leaving enough hard drive space, because I've run out. I've had a couple of memory errors in the last, probably 3 or 4 in the last 3 weeks. And I'm just like, I don't know. I've never had this before. And suddenly it's all a thing. So evidently it is a thing. So I've definitely experienced it.
That's interesting. See, that tends to be where I go with it too, Alex. Is like, what did I do wrong?
My fault.
I must be doing something wrong.
I must be doing something. I don't usually assume that the operating system is having a problem managing memory. So I usually assume that I've done, and I've got so many experimental things on my especially on my Mac Minis that have Monterey that they're not my day-to-day work machines. And so I'm constantly like newest of everything and betas of all kinds of stuff. And yeah. And so if it breaks, I'm like, oh, I must be doing something wrong.
I usually say, it's beta. It's the beta. I'm running some beta somewhere that's causing the issue.
It's offensive. It's offensive because we're dealing with a situation where Nestle wants to own all the water. Now we've got corporations owning time. We don't get to have our own sense of time.
Yeah,
No,
we're all
no.
going to have to set up our own nuclear or atomic clocks. I mean,
I think there's somewhere in this conversation is a discussion about the totalitarianism of daylight savings, like this whole shifting our schedule around. I'm just waiting for somebody to run on just that platform. Like, I'm not going to tell you anything else I'm going to do. I'm just going to get rid of daylight savings. I'd vote for that person.
I think we just lost the vote.
Yeah, you got my vote. Yeah,
or at least all I want is to come up with a descriptive name that actually gives me a sense of daylight savings. Well, am I saving it at the beginning of the day? Am I saving it at the end of the day? Because I always, every single time that an app or I'm setting up a device or a new watch and it's asking, is daylight savings time on or off? I have to Google it just to know, is daylight savings time on or off? I know spring forward, fall back, but I don't know what it means.
Right, which one's which? Exactly.
I just say PT. Like other people send me PST, and I'm like, but I remember one time I said PST, and someone said PDT, and I was like PT, and that was
Alex,
it. I never used them again.
Alex, we do the same hack. That's exactly what I just
PT.
refuse to put. Yep,
I'm
exactly.
not going to guess.
Micah.
Yeah,
I found the news story. It was the province of Alberta. The proud province of Alberta voted yes to fluoride, no to removing daylight savings time, and they're split on equalization payments. What is happening to this world? I don't know.
Oh my goodness. One of us will hopefully correct the daylight saving time issue. Anyway, let's move on. This is an interesting story that had me kind of thinking about the way that I've had to do returns or replacements or repairs with Apple in the past. Reportedly, Apple is going to start offering the iPhone XR as a loaner device if you have a lengthier repair time. So if you bring in your phone and you have a repair time that might take a while, Apple may start to offer you an iPhone XR to kind of carry around with you until it comes time for you to be able to get your actual phone back. And this made me think of the time when my MacBook Pro's battery started bloating and I had to take it in to get, replaced or whatever they did. They did a bunch of stuff to it. And of course, I had my work computer, but I thought, man, if I didn't have my work machine, it would really be complicated to get any work done. Or if you don't have a company that you work for that also provides a machine, then you would have that issue. So the XR is kind of a in-between loaner is not a bad idea. But I'm curious if you folks have done repair replacements before and what your experience has been with getting or not getting a loaner. And
can you imagine the poor iPhone SE person who's getting the iPhone XR and they're like, there's no home button. I don't know. I've been avoiding that for 3 years and you're doing this to me now. And then the person who's on an iPhone 13 Pro Max going, what is this? What is this? Just nobody's going to be happy, Micah.
Yeah, it's really going to be a test of faith in Apple, however, because when you consider not even beyond the amount of personal data that is synced to your phone when you need to use it day to day, but now I'm like, okay, I know I've read every single technical paper about the secure enclave, but now I'm about to enroll in in unlocking mechanisms, biometric unlocking mechanisms with this. I am now about to enroll in tap to pay on this device that I'm going to be sending back, that I'm only using for a week, I hope. There's a difference between trusting in a technology works in the abstract and say, even better, that physics demonstration where a demonstrator dunks their hand in the middle of molten metal, but because they coated their hand with water, there's an effect where it flashes to steam so quickly that it provides an insulating layer. It's like, wow, what an interesting phenomenon. And then when someone says, well, actually, we have a pot of molten lead right here, why don't we spray up your hand and you can demonstrate it? It's like, oh, maybe not.
I realized I was thinking about this question, and I realized I've never taken my computer in for anybody to ever repair in the history of computers for me. And I think it has to do with, because of some of the stuff I've done in the past. I don't. The idea of having my hardware out of my control is a problem for me. And so for instance, I work with some companies that we worked with some companies that if you, not me, but their employees unload everything if they're overseas. They'll unload everything, because if customs asks for their computer, they just give it to customs and they walk away. Like literally, like, this is yours. Like you can't. They don't want it back. And so when they do that, it makes me, it gives me pause. And so if I have a computer that breaks, I have to admit that I try to get it to work or I unload stuff off of it, but I've never actually taken it in because I don't think I could use it again. Like I would worry about it all the time, and so same thing with my phones. Is I've broken a couple phones, but then that's just the end of that phone. Like I don't take it in because I have a huge. I didn't think about it in the consciousness until right now, but that I just don't feel comfortable having someone else have my hardware and then get it back and keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, I have taken a MacBook, as I said, a MacBook in before to have it serviced by Apple. Took it to the Apple store and they sent it away and replaced the battery. And I think because of whatever year it was, they also had to replace the keyboard and all that stuff, and got it back and everything was fine. But before I took it in, I completely wiped it. It was just a fresh MacBook
absolutely.
Pro. Because there was no way I was going to send it off with my stuff on there, and I think
at minimum, you want to do that, And it actually, the funny thing is I still buy computers thinking I might take them in someday, because I buy them with very small hard drives, mostly so that it's just system information on it, and then everything else is on some external drive that I could just unplug and then just give you the hardware. So I do it in that plan. I just never take it in, but I think it also speaks to some of Apple's reliability that I don't need to. I've had very few that just break on their own. Usually I did something to them to kill them. But I think that you should definitely not take a computer into any repair store with things on it. That's, things that matter. That would be a bad idea.
Absolutely. Andy, you were going to say something?
This is a great policy, though, that for people who want to have access to that sort of thing, it's always advisable to keep your old phone just in case. But a lot of people, especially with iPhones, how durable they are, they've already passed them down to another person in the family. Well, but you're kind of screwed if you have absolutely nothing to transact with, and you can't afford to borrow a replacement from somebody.
And one of the things for me is that I have a protective cover, faceplate, and then I have this thing that's kind of a wallet that is also a protective case. And I do this immediately, like within a day of having the phone. Like I had this one for like 2 days, and I was like, I can't take it out of the house because it hasn't been put in a case yet. And so once it goes into the case, when you pull it out, it's in mint condition the whole time. So I don't. Yep. And I did that because I bought one a couple years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and immediately dropped it.
Man.
2 days. And it didn't break it. Here's the worst part is it didn't break it enough to replace it. It just had a little chip in the upper corner.
Yes.
And you're just like, oh, like I can't believe that. Every time you look at it, you're just like, chip in the corner. Really? And so
chip in the corner.
We are brothers from another mother. My Pixel 6 Pro arrived 2 hours ago. Even before I put in the swim. Before I turned it on for the first time, I put it into this new case that has been sitting around for about a week because I'm like you. I've never dropped a phone and broke it almost immediately, but I would be so upset with myself. I have dropped a camera like the very first time I took it out. I was using it above a concrete surface, and it didn't. And just like you said, it didn't break it enough to like actually break it, but it broke it enough so that for the past 5 years, every time I swap out a battery or a memory card, I have to unpeel the little piece of gaffer's tape that's keeping the battery cover closed, and reminded how incompetent I was, like with this 8-day-old $600 camera. Yes,
we had somebody in our office. They dropped a $16,000 lens, taking it out of the box. It was this Cabrio lens, and they took it out, they dropped it, and I just looked at it, I was like, well, that's what insurance is for.
What monastery are they living at right now? What denomination did they decide to call it?
We like to call it a monastery, but there's bars and animals.
It's also secundus. It's the Emperor's prison plan.
He does spend time. He does live in what's called a cell alone most of the time, living a very simple existence.
He goes out to the yard, but he stays in the corner because the lions are in the yard, and it's
Alex is training his
and at the end of every day, he says to himself, "But you know what? That's fair."
Yeah, exactly.
drop that
Yeah.
lens.
You drop that. Yeah, exactly. You drop that lens. And you're like, you know what? I belong here.
My bad.
Yeah, exactly.
We got to take another quick break, but we'll come back with more, including conversation about Apple's earnings report and lots more to come. This episode of Mac Break Weekly is brought to you by userway.org. I love that userway.org is sponsoring this episode. Userway, the vision is such an important one. Every website, without exception, it needs to be accessible because it's a public entity. So there's a rule that it needs to be accessible. There's a law that it needs to be accessible. But honestly, every website should be accessible because it's the right thing to do. And Userway has an incredible AI-powered solution that tirelessly enforces the hundreds of WCAG guidelines. These are special guidelines to make the web accessible. With just one line of JavaScript, Userway can achieve more than an entire team of developers. It makes your website accessible because that process can be incredibly overwhelming. Userway solutions make it simple, easy, and cost-effective. You can check out the free scanning tool to see if your website is ADA compliant. Now, Userway's AI and machine learning solutions power accessibility for more than 1 million websites, and it's trusted by some brands you might recognize: Coca-Cola, Disney, eBay, FedEx, and many other leading brands. Now, Userway is making its best-in-class enterprise-level accessibility tools available to small and medium businesses. Operating an accessible and compliant website isn't only the right thing to do, it also makes business sense. Millions of people will require Userway just to purchase your products, and when you need to scale, well, you need Userway. For years, Userway has been on the cutting edge, creating innovative accessibility technologies that push the envelope of what's possible with AI, machine learning, and computer vision. Userway's AI automatically fixes violations at the code level. You want to know about some things that Userway can do? Well, first, it can auto-generate image alts, so it writes those image descriptions for you. It remediates complex nav menus, which of course is an Achilles heel for many companies. Userway ensures that all pop-ups are accessible. It fixes vague link violations and fixes any broken links, and ensures your website makes use of accessible colors while remaining true to your brand. I think that was really pretty cool. And Userway gives you a detailed report of all the violations that were fixed on your website. Userway is also platform agnostic. Whether you're using WordPress or Shopify or Wix, you can easily add Userway, and the same goes for AEM, Sitecore, or SharePoint. Userway integrates seamlessly with all. So let Userway help your business meet its compliance goals and improve the experience for your users. Oh, and by the way, the voice of Siri, who of course is considered the world's most popular voice assistant, has a message about Userway.
I'm Susan Bennett, the original voice of Siri. You won't hear me say something like this too often. I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're looking for. But every day, that's what the internet is like for millions of people with disabilities. Userway fixes all of that with just one line of code.
One line of code. Userway can make any website fully accessible and ADA compliant. With Userway, everyone who visits your site can browse seamlessly and customize it to fit their needs. It's also a perfect way to showcase your brand's commitment to millions of people with disabilities. Go to userway.org/twit and get 30% off Userway's AI-powered accessibility solution. Userway, making the internet accessible for everyone. Visit userway.org/twit today. Please head to that URL so they know we sent you. Userway.org/twit. Thanks, Userway, for sponsoring this week's episode of Mac Break Weekly. Before we headed to the break, we were talking about sending your device in for repair or replacement. And one of the things that just happened is iFixit recently tore down the new MacBook Pros, and in doing so have determined that the latest version of Apple's MacBook is a little more repairable than previous versions. In fact, it's a little bit easier to replace some of the internal components than they have made it before. And I thought it would be a good time to chat a little bit about that. You know, Alex, you were talking about how when your machine goes down, you don't tend to take it in. Have you ever upgraded your device on your own, repaired your device on your own, or do you just kind of go, okay, this one's done, time to get a new one?
I did that a lot with I had a lot of Mac Pros, the old cheese graters. I had a lot of those, and obviously we were constantly in there, putting cards in, taking cards out, doing other things with them. So I think that was something that we tinkered a lot more. I did attempt to fix or to upgrade some RAM in my laptop once, and I don't do that anymore. I got another computer. I destroyed it. So I think I probably didn't have the right tools from iFixit is probably it. I do think that although I did notice that they also reviewed the repairability of the Apple polishing cloth, and it came out very bad. It did not fare nearly as well as the MacBook Pro. It turns out when you take it apart, you can't. There's no way to put it back together.
And no user replaceable battery in it for some reason.
Exactly.
I thought, wow. The most involved.
I'm here also every time there's a device without a headphone jack to complain bitterly about it, as though my mother just got into a traffic accident. So yeah, no headphone jack. What's up?
The most involved repair I did was of a battery for one of the MacBook Pros of yesteryear. I got the iFixit kit. This was for a friend. They needed a new battery. And so I said, okay, yeah, I'll do that for you. So I got the iFixit kit with the they bought it and had it sent to me. iFixit kit with the battery and all the stuff you needed. Part of it was adhesive remover. So you had to put on these, I think it was nitrile gloves or whatever, and take this squeeze bottle and squeeze this this adhesive remover all over the battery, and then slowly but carefully remove it after you took apart pretty much the entire machine and then built it back afterward after you installed the new battery. It was a really involved process, but what was kind of nice is that while I was taking it all apart, then you could clean out the inside even better than you normally would. So able to get all of the dust out of the fans, and it was like a brand new machine afterward with that brand new battery in it. Renee, do you do repairs of your device, or have you done any kind of repair replacement stuff with your device? I know that these days it is hard. Like Alex was saying, it used to be there was a little bit easier, more to do, more you could replace.
No, for two main reasons. I used to when I built my own PCs, and I'd make my own tower PCs, and I'd swap out cards and things like that. But like my father can, well, not today, but like back in the day, he would rebuild cars, and he would he built homes. Like he was just incredibly handy. He would build whatever we needed, and then it got to a point where like he opened a hood and looked at a Tesla and went, I have no idea what this is anymore. And I was like that way before. I don't have his technical acumen. I don't have his talent when it comes to understanding physical things and repairing and replacing them. So that is something I am perfectly content to outsource to a manufacturer or a qualified service representative. I would rather they do it well than I do it poorly, just at a point of pride or speediness.
They do make good stunt laptops. Once you've broken one, I broke the screen on one of them in a titanium, and I used to use it in the before times when I used to go to actual conferences. It was really fun to be up. You wanted to wake everybody up. You just walk up to the front of the room and accidentally drop your laptop, but drop it like in epic proportions, like trip and let it go and let it like fly, and the whole crowd just goes, oh, and then you pull out another one. You go, that's why we have backups. And then it wakes everybody up. You get at least 15 minutes out of that, of adrenaline.
Exactly. Not bad. So I'm glad that these ones seem to be more user repairable, user replaceable. For the folks who want to do that, I tend to like to do that. It's not out of pride or anything like that. It's just out of curiosity. Certainly when I was a kid, I would take things apart. And then, of course, the classic is that you don't put them back together. Yep. And if it was something that didn't belong to me, I did put it back together. If it was something that belonged to me, sometimes I wouldn't put it back together.
But you had 3 screws left. Where did those 3 screws come from?
Where did they? Yeah. What were these for?
It's one thing. It's one thing when a Kia does it, and you know that they just put a couple extra screws in there. It's another thing when you took the thing apart and then you put it back together, and all those pieces were there before, and now they're not. And now you're like you're there's something wrong.
Yeah.
I've always been in the habit. Oh, go ahead, Andy.
No, before we move on, that it really is most significant that they've made the batteries so much easier and simpler to replace, because we're not just talking about repairs now, even though that is significant. That is, as a lot of us have been saying, replacing a battery is one of the most transformative things you can do to an old rechargeable device. But also, we're confronting a lot of issues in communities where things just get tossed out, and you have these lithium let's not call them bombs, but things that can start runaway fires. And if you've got them in a pile of recycling stuff in your community, that here is a whole bunch of lithium powered things in a pile. Once one of them goes off, because let's say there was a flood or something in that basement or whatever, once one of them goes off, you've got a huge problem that involves toxic fumes and stuff. So the ability for at least whoever it is at a very, very safety conscious recycling center, if they can easily pop off the bottom, immediately just pull a couple of tabs to release batteries without having to, God forbid, subject them to heat to release an adhesive, and get rid of or recycle all the other parts, but put the battery in a place where it can't do that much damage to the property to other people, that's a huge thing forward. So that is, of all the things that are important about right to repair, or about repairability, or about these iFixit scores, the ability for just a barely trained person to safely get out a lithium battery and recycle that separately and safely, that for me is a huge step forward. I'm glad to see evidence of this in the new MacBooks.
Yes, I agree. The one last thing I was going to say is I have a habit of, anytime I get a smart home product, I typically take it apart just to see what all is inside. And that behavior was reinforced one time when I got this product, and I took it apart, and hidden behind the frame was a microphone that wasn't mentioned anywhere in the features of the device. And Renee, you probably remember me talking to you about this. And so I thought, what is going on here? And I ended up reaching out to the company, and they were talking about how in the future they would think about adding, a feature with a microphone, et cetera. But I just took it and unplugged it from the main board and took the microphone out and put the thing back together. But after that, now every time, I don't care what company it comes from, if it's a smart home device, I always will take it apart just to see what's inside and put it back together. So I love having my kit of screws that aren't, the standard ones, but it's nice that this stuff is as repairable as it is. And I know what's it called? The free phone or something like that, that lets you, it comes with standard screws and fair phone. Thank you. The free phone is probably some creepy,
ultra right wing
rights.
Freedom
phone.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes. Renee, you sound like you were about to say something.
No.
Oh, okay.
I remember this when you first discovered this. I remember we were trying to figure out what was going on there.
Yeah, that was pretty wild stuff. All right, let's move on. I wanted to talk about the App Store. This is an ongoing conversation. The idea of making money in the App Store and the way that people see and value apps and services. Notability is a really popular app for iOS, iPadOS, and in some cases macOS that lets you take notes in loads of different ways. And you can use it to record things. You can use it to sketch. You can use it to add photos. It's an incredible app, one of the top rated apps that on iOS today, Rosemary Orchard and I end up talking about rather often, depending on which episode we are covering. And Notability just recently announced that it was going freemium, meaning that it is available to download for free with many of the built-in features, and then you pay a subscription to use the more involved features, the deeper features. And with that came a whole host of people very upset about Notability going freemium, and even going as far as trying to submit to the App Store complaints about because Apple recently added a option to report scam apps. Again, they added that back. And people reporting the app saying that it was violating the App Store guidelines. I wanted to talk to all of you about the history of the App Store, the cost of apps in the App Store. And, all of us, I think, at the very least, have colleagues and friends who are app developers, and in many cases have developed apps ourselves that have been published in the App Store and have worked in app development in some way. It's kind of wild for me when I am speaking with folks I know outside that aren't steeped in tech and talking to them about apps, and I say, oh yeah, this is the perfect app for this specific thing that you're asking for. And then they say, okay, cool. I send them the link. It's $1.99 in the App Store, and suddenly they don't want it. And you try to explain to them, that is actually a very, very good price for this app. So I'm just curious about your experiences. Andy, it sounds like you'd like to kick things off.
Sure. Just that you're rarely talking about huge companies that are trying to figure out that I'm tired of having to buying the synthetic yacht wax. I want to buy the yacht wax that's made from endangered species bones because it just upsets me. You're talking about small shops. As professional as these apps look, as professional as the website is, as professional as the fact that you can email tech support and get a real human responding in less than an hour and a half. Oftentimes you are talking about a one-person shop or 2 or 3 or 4 people who hire a good designer, who hire people to put on that really, really great face. And it is so hard to make money off the App Store. Every single time that we talk about the revenues that keep increasing in the App Store, every time that Apple very, very proudly tells developers how many billions of dollars they've paid out and how many people they've hired, we have to remember that we're not talking about these 2 or 3, 4-person shops that are doing to-do list managers. Most of that money, nearly all of that money, is going to in-app purchases in games, and there's a very, very small sliver of people who use the App Store who are actually paying that money. So they need to find ways to make sure that they can sustain this product. And so I think that money is valuable. That's why they call it money. And so every time that the payment model or of a favorite app changes, that you've gone from, well, I paid $20 for it or $5 for it 3 years ago, and now I own it. I never have to buy anything ever again. Once they start saying that, by the way, we're not giving any more updates to this, it's now going to cost you 80 cents a month. give us 12, give us $10, give us $10 a year for continued access to it. You have it. $10 is $10. Think about it, but realize that is what's happening to continue to make your favorite app get better and better and better. Every single time that I've switched, that a favorite app of mine has switched to this model, I too have grumbled. I've never considered review bombing the site because I won't say that I'm not a monster. I'm just not that kind of monster. Absolutely. But at some point you realize that the benefit of this is that instead of this becoming an abandoned product in 2 years' time, instead of at some point I buy a brand new iPhone and now this product won't work on it because it's not compatible with all this new hardware, not only will it continue to be compatible, but they can continue to put better and better features in it. And furthermore, I'm helping this person to get paid for the work that they're doing that I appreciate. So yeah, the more you understand about where the money goes in the App Store, the more you understand how the App Store, and not just the Apple App Store, but others have sort of trained the market that apps should be free. They're going to be supported by ads. They're going to find a way to steal data from us and use to pay for the app. The more that goes on, the more we're being trained not to pay for apps. And that is absolutely not sustainable for anybody who's making anything of value. If it's a value, anticipate paying for it. If you like it, show your love, not just by sending an email saying, I love your product. Say, I love your product. Here, have some money. That's how it works.
Yeah, and I think that if something's free, I either feel like they're taking something that I don't know about, or I'm afraid they're not going to last. There's I always live looking around the corner like, what's going on here if it's free, and I don't have a problem. I mean, I think that I'm probably pretty insensitive. I don't buy as many apps as I used to. I mean, I think I probably bought 2 or 3 apps a week for a long time, and now I kind of like, I don't know if I need that or not, or I'll buy a whole bunch in one area that I'm looking at, but 2, 3, 4. I think once I get over $4.99, I go, do I really need this app? Like that's the thing. And then I have to admit that I'm super sensitive to subscriptions because they just sneak up on me. And I suddenly realized there was some point where I realized I had like $100 a month going out in subscriptions to stuff that I wasn't using anymore, and I just hadn't noticed. So now I'm like if I have a 1-year subscription, a week after I sign up for it, I usually just go into the apps. I go into my management tool, and I just inside of your profile, and I just cancel it. And then I just go if I get to a year and I remember, or a month, or whatever the iteration is, and I'm still using it, I'll fix that. But otherwise, I want it to automatically just turn off. Because otherwise because I definitely spent hundreds of dollars with some companies that And so I think that the subscription thing I've become super sensitive to. I mean, I think it makes sense in a lot of ways for a lot of companies, but I think when you get oversubscriptioned, and that's the real problem with it. I think Notability, the hard part with some of these is if you don't have a real niche. I've had Notability since it was released, and I still think the problem is that it competes with Notes for me. Like, I have Notability, or I have Notes, which is on everything. And it's seamless, and Apple seems to spend a lot of money on it. I mean, developing it because it keeps on getting better. I think that's the hard part, is getting people to turn the corner on something that already kind of exists in the OS. I have some friends that have built apps that just keep making money, and they don't do that much to them. They just come up in a search because there's only 2 or 3 of them in the world that do it. You'd be surprised at how many. There's not that many apps that show you how to make certain things, and so it's a and they just keep and it's not enough money to retire on, but it's enough money to pay the lease in your house. so I think it just depends on what market you get into as well.
Renee, your thoughts?
The thing I've been saying about this for years is, and it gets me a lot of hate and it's really unpopular, but I think it's still true, is that we've gone from an app stores have absolutely accelerated this, but we've gone from an age where apps were extremely scarce and extremely valuable, and you bought them every few years, and Office cost a fortune, Adobe cost a fortune, Final Cut cost a fortune. Most apps, like I remember on the Palm Trio, my Sticky Notes app was $50, and they were all major investments because they were so scarce and so new. And app stores have hastened the transformation of apps from this scarcity to abundance. They've become pop, the same way music has, the same way films have, the same way. Like, there are very few musicians who make significant amounts of money. There's very few bloggers. I mean, the web destroyed a lot of the value of news, and we've seen this. It's totally commoditized it. And anybody can sing, anybody can make a video, but a lot of people do not make any significant amount of money from these things. And I think there was a real dissonance in the understanding. Like, there was a gold rush in the beginning of the App Store and the Play Store, where we saw stories about developers making hundreds of thousands of dollars a week. And that's because this was all fresh and new. But then, developers started racing to the bottom. Customers learned if they waited, things would get cheaper. Apple kept creating kept commoditizing more and more apps to create more and more value about hardware. Created this vicious cycle that I think was inevitable, but was vastly accelerated. And now we're at an age where, like pCalc is wonderful. It's a $10 calculator app. There's very little room for other $10 calculator apps, maybe another $4 one. And then the rest have to be free or very, very inexpensive. And category after category have followed that pattern. There are some where there's still a little bit of robust competition, especially if you can get enterprise, money into what you're doing. But otherwise, there's just so many millions of apps, and people can download them, and they're supported by venture capitalists or by massive social networks that don't have to make any money off of it. And that just makes it incredibly hard to compete. You have to do exactly what Alex said, and that is, like, there's medical apps, there's aviation apps, there are things where people, it's literally time over money, and they will pay you a small fortune to do something incredibly important to them. But those aren't the big apps that you see everywhere. The big apps you see everywhere are the free to download, the Netflixes and all of that thing. So I think it's something we have to come to terms with. I love our indie developer friends, but I also love our indie blogger friends, our indie YouTuber friends, our indie musician friends, and they all face the same problem now. And it's not going to get easier. You've just got to get more and more creative, and you've got to catch that zeitgeist when you can.
I think that's well put.
Any thoughts? I do think that a lot of talk is made about community, which I talk about a lot, that I work on, is that developers, we're moving for everyone. We're moving out of a time when you can make this work with advertising alone. We're moving out of a time when you can just put something out and sell it. You really have to figure out how you're going to engage the audience that you want to interact with, and so I think that developers have to figure out a way they become part of a community or build a community around what they're doing. I know that we have some developers that are within the office hours community, and they're responsive, and they're figuring stuff out with the community, and they're making adjustments against it. And you know what happens? A lot of people buy their software. They're buying their software because they know that they've got, they're getting tools. The community is actually the developers who are being responsive, and they're being they're part of our. Sometimes they come on office hours. They're in after hours answering questions. They're in Discord talking to folks about it and making adjustments and putting out new things. And at that point, everyone feels like, well, that's the person I should be using that software over another software that looks the same because I have a relationship with that person. And a lot of us have gone to certain restaurants because we have a relationship with the owner comes out and says hi, and the waiter knows what you want, and there's all these other things that you have, and you go there above everything else because of the service and because you feel connected. And I think that as things continue to separate, I think the developers that kind of figure that model out are going to do much better, over time than developers that think they can just put out a product and just have it work. Like just sell it by itself. All of the stuff, all the products that I've sold in the last 20 years have all been based on having a large community that was already connected to me or to my company that bought into it when we sold something. That when we were selling DVMat back in the aughts, that was all people who knew what I did. And I think that developers thinking that they can just develop it and just survive on that it's going to get harder. That hill is going to keep getting steeper. So,
agreed. All right, a couple of other things. There's a report that suggests that Apple is cutting back on iPad production in order to meet demand for iPhone shipments. So, due to, we just keep hearing about the supply shortages, and apparently, in order to reallocate the components to the iPhone, they're cutting back on iPad shipments. So that seems like what is being said is that the sort of components that would work for both the iPad and the iPhone, they're taking those and saying, okay, you're making them. Let's make sure we have enough iPhones on stock to get those out, which I guess is kind of nice.
You can always tell which one has more margin. When they decide which one, this one, we'll put this one off a little bit, or which one's making the most money for the company. And so the iPhone is still the winner of that. And they need to make sure that people aren't getting frustrated and not able to buy a phone and then go buy something else.
Yeah, they did say that explicitly during the. They did say that explicitly.
No, I was going to say exactly what you were saying, Andy. Please go ahead.
Yeah, that they said that they expect iPad sales to decline year over year. I don't remember if they said specifically we're reallocating our capacity so much as they just simply said that, well, we've got supply constraints. But they also promised that but other categories are going to grow and are well protected. So I didn't listen. I'm trying to recall transcripts. I didn't actually watch it live, but yeah. So they did acknowledge that directly, and it's not surprising.
Yeah, they didn't say they were taking from iPad to feed iPhone. Right. They just said that the iPhone had been supply constrained, and the iPad was expected to be supply constrained next. And I think there was some confusion because Apple said they were being hit by shortages, but they once again said legacy nodes, and that confuses people because they start to think, oh, it's Intel. Like, why is Apple blaming Intel? And it's not. Like, Intel is also leading edge node. Legacy nodes are all those little controller chips. When you're talking about a leading edge node, Apple's not constrained. They buy so much of the 5 nanometer process and the 7 nanometer process still that Taiwan Semiconductor is putting out. They basically prepay the whole thing. They get it off the ground. But there's all these other components that are still like on 90 nanometers and more that there's little switch and communication chips and controller chips that are in all the other components that Apple uses. And those have been heavily supply constrained. There was even a comment that, like, yes, cars are facing a chip shortage, but it's because they won't pay for the modern stuff. They really want the cheap legacy stuff, and that's still highly constrained. So I think it's a reflection of the legacy node still not coming back to capacity.
Yeah.
Got it. The other one I wanted to mention before we take a quick break and come back with our picks, Apple continues to work on its Apple podcast subscription service. In fact, Twit is one of the folks who is one of the groups that has subscriptions for each of the audio versions of our podcasts on Apple Podcasts. I think it's $2.99 a month. You can subscribe for an ad-free version of the audio podcast. Now Apple is working with the BBC and with Slate, bringing some extra features via those two folks, I guess, those two groups. So BBC Studios and Slate itself, it says the show 5 Minutes On already exists, but if you were to try to access the landing page, you'd get an error message. BBC Studios is calling these previously localized programs exclusives, and there will be more coming soon. So these were kind of region locked before, and so you could only play them in the UK. Now they're going to be available to people outside of the UK through this subscription service. And then Slate, it says that it has launched its own Apple Podcast subscription, and you could get ad-free listening and bonus content, which is its Slate Plus program. So some shows that aren't available elsewhere, or shows that have ads, you can get without any ads through Apple's subscription service. So continuing to see some players play in this space. I am curious, have any of you folks checked out the subscription service through Apple Podcasts? Is that something that you could see yourself doing, or are you more likely to go and subscribe in the way that our Club Twit, for example, is set up, where you've got kind of a memberful subscription? Does this in-app thing work for you? My big issue is that I don't use Apple Podcasts as my main podcast app. And so for me, it's easier to use one that generates kind of a link on its own. Yeah. But I think if I did use Apple Podcasts, I could see why I would use this.
You're absolutely right. I don't like being locked into one player, because on every single device that I own, Apple, Windows, Android, everything, it depends on what device it is, what mood I'm in. So that really doesn't work for me. Also, I would I realize that I'm asking creators to do things the way that I want them to do it, but I would much rather they have a Patreon or some sort of their own like self-funding membership thing, where I can just simply go to their Patreon, decide how much money of a month I want to give them. If they say that, hey, by the way, if you want to continue to get our podcast like the day that they're released, as opposed to access to the archives, we're going to need $5 a month. For many podcasts, I would absolutely do that, because the great thing about services like Patreon is that it's not just about, as I said before, I love the thing you created. Here is some money to validate exactly how much I like it. It's also, you're becoming part of a more well-connected community of people who support the show, more valid private discussions around these shows. So I don't think that subscriptions through Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or through YouTube memberships, I don't think that they create all of the value that a creator can get through trying to find a way to do that more independently.
Well said. Renee, what about you?
I have much the same feeling as Andy. I say this as someone, full disclosure, I have a service called Nebula that I helped found that has podcasts without advertising in it. And then when you subscribe to that, you get all the podcasts without advertising. And I find like that's the sort of thing I'm gravitating towards. I'm even getting annoyed by streaming services because they all have different shows, and I want to watch a bunch of those shows, and I got to subscribe to 8 different streaming services now just to watch the shows I want, where like this is a solved problem for music, whether I want Apple Music or Spotify, previously Spotify. Now they're, well, thank goodness they're rooping off Joe Rogan. I don't have to listen to him anymore. But like if there's shows I do want to listen to, they're becoming exclusive, and I hate that. I would much rather everyone had similar content, and I got to pick which service best suited my needs. But I realize we don't live in that age anymore, and this is much the same. Like I love that Apple and Google and everybody is patronizing, podcasts to a certain degree, but it means you have to have 8 different apps and 8 different services and 8 different subscriptions to get everything you want. And I think that's ultimately worse for the consumer.
I agree. Alex, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit that now that I'm used to live conversation the whole time, I don't listen to as many podcasts as I used to. I think that's the hard part. I listen to some of the Twit podcasts. I listen to This American Life. I listen to a handful of other ones, but my time frame is so constrained because I spend a couple hours a day in office hours that I realize that all my time that I had before listening to podcasts and NPR and everything else have been, because office hours runs 24/7 now. If I want to listen to something, I just turn it on. I just open up Zoom and I just listen to it, and there's some geeky conversation going on in the background that isn't. What I find interesting about that is not organized, and it's not written, and it's not. There's no structure to it. It's just people talking about geeky things, and it's not always about media either, but it's kind of geeky discussion. And so I found myself. I was thinking about it while Andy and Renee were talking. I was like, what do I listen to? And I still listen to a handful, but it's really gotten down. I haven't found any new ones, and I will admit that I'm painfully particular about audio, at this point. And so,
right.
If someone's podcast isn't done with with really good audio, I just can't listen to it. I can barely listen to NPR at this point. Like, it's like the phoners drive me crazy. Like I don't want to, can't do that. So I think that's the other thing, is that I'm kind of used to just hearing good audio all the time. And I have a hard time listening to bad audio for very long, more than a couple minutes. So, I mean, as enjoyable, because my schedule is so tight that it has to kind of be just right. And so I've noticed that I just haven't listened. I'm surprised at how many podcasts are done by people who don't pay attention to their microphone. like we've been doing this for a long time. Like, we've been doing this it's been 15 years now. Like, yeah, like like if you're going to spend the time to put something on a podcast, you really need a radio mic. That's, and I've go ahead. What were you gonna say?
I was just going to say 1,000% agree. Yes.
I don't understand. Like, they're not that expensive. But I'm just like, I turn someone's podcast on. They'll be like, oh, I got this new podcast. And I go, oh, I'll check it out. And I turn it on. I'm like, nope. I'm not going to, I don't care what you're saying. I just can't hear it. So I think that, I've noticed that, and I think definitely after 15 years, at the beginning, we were just happy to get something online. But after 15 years, the tools have gotten really good. And I'm always amazed that someone thinks that making a podcast with bad audio would be, okay, or even viable. So it's still, I would argue 90% of the podcasts are bad audio. So.
Wow. Yeah. And they just keep making more.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. Well, most of them are good enough. I'm more swayed by content than by. So as long as the audio is at least a C or a C plus, I'll stick with it. It's the people that are like, "Hi, could you? I know that you're using your phone's microphone, but could you take off the kazoo that you've taped to the microphone? Maybe that would help me hear a little bit better."
Yeah.
I like to keep Scotch tape over my microphone grill. All right, let's take a quick break so I can tell you about Coinbase Week before we come back with the picks of the week. Coinbase is sponsoring this episode of MacBreak Weekly. If you've ever been looking to level up your financial portfolio, well, it's always good to diversify. Why not think about cryptocurrency? It's backed by the world's leading investors, and Coinbase keeps your portfolio safe and secure while adding some crypto into your mix. Coinbase offers a trusted and easy-to-use platform to buy, sell, and spend cryptocurrency. They support the most popular digital currencies on the market and make them accessible to everyone. They also offer portfolio management and protection, learning resources, and a mobile app so you can trade securely and monitor your crypto all in one place. Millions of people in more than 100 countries trust Coinbase with their digital assets. Whether you're looking to diversify, if you're just getting started, or if you're searching for a better way to access crypto markets, well, start today with Coinbase. For a limited time, new users can get $10 in free Bitcoin when you sign up today at coinbase.com/MacBreak. Sign up at coinbase.com/MacBreak for $10 in free Bitcoin. This offer is for a limited time only, so be sure to sign up today. That's coinbase.com/MacBreak. Thank you, Coinbase, for sponsoring this week's episode of MacBreak Weekly. I know I have the Coinbase app on my phone, and I do love the little notifications I'll get with little bits of learning about kind of the cryptocurrencies that are out there. It's a pretty neat service there. All right, gentlemen, we have reached nearly the end of the show, which means it's time for our picks of the week. And eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Alex, we're going to start with you and your pick. Oh, we got you muted again.
Sorry. So I had the opportunity. I become super. Someone mentioned on Twitter that they can hear me swallowing, and so now I'm constantly muted. If I take a drink, I'm constantly muted. And I finally I just want to thank the person whoever did that. Spent $800 on this little box that just showed up last night, so I can push a little button that mutes me and then lets me do a bunch of other things to it. So thank you very much. It's a very expensive Twitter follower. So anyway,
anyway, pay for it for you, right?
Anyway, so. I was like, oh. Anyway, so the I just had the opportunity to do a pretty cool project in Cinema 4D, and I just wanted to recommend it. So the new version's out, and it's just such a powerful 3D application. So for those of you who don't know what Cinema 4D is, it's a 3D application, and in the broadcast world, it has kind of taken over. So there are lots of, there's Blender's free, and then some people model in Modo, and then there's Maya and Houdini, and there's on the other end, and and those are kind of high-end, more specialized tools for large facilities. But for the day-to-day, I want to do a great broadcast graphics. When we talk to some friends of mine that work in broadcast, everybody's using Cinema. And so this is really, and the new version, of course, just gets better. There's some modifiers that are really cool. They have some spline imports and capsules. But the bottom line is it's more of an excuse just to talk about the fact that I think I've been using this app for like 20 years, and I kind of went away from it for a couple of years and came back and played with it. And I was like, wow, this thing is powerful. And it's just so much, like when you're really serious about, I want to actually do some 3D work, it's just got a lot of bells and whistles that are really great. And they've got a subscription now that you can get, so you don't have to spend the, I don't know, thousands of dollars that it used to be. You can spend, I don't know, $79 a month or $50 a month or something like that to get Cinema if it's something that you think, and they have a trial version of it. And it's just such a pleasurable app to work in. And we're getting really into it because we're using it as part of our pipeline. We're going to talk about it tomorrow in office hours. Modo and Cinema are the two places that we're generating our 3D models for USDZ. And USDZ, of course, is Apple's kind of internal 3D tool that 3D format that is being used to. You can open it in Preview, you can open it in Motion and Final Cut, and I think that market's about to explode, like in a massive way. And so, if you're trying to figure out what you're doing next and you have some interest in that, I would definitely download it. We're going to be talking a lot about it in office hours, but it's one of the key apps to generating the geometry and making that work. So anyway, it's a great application if you're thinking about 3D. I think Blender's a great place to get started, but as soon as you have less time and more money, Cinema is the next step because it takes a lot less time to get a lot more done. So Blender's great because it doesn't cost as much. It just doesn't have the same feature set. And so it's a really powerful application, and I'd recommend checking it out.
Well, inquiring minds would also like to know about your mute switch. I know it wasn't your pick, but
I was going to recommend it next week. That's fine. This is the mute switch that I got. So this is my. I won't use. I've used up two now. This is a Studio Technologies. It's called a Model 205, and so what this does is this runs off of Dante. So this is a PoE, so Power over Ethernet. It sits on a Dante network. Dante is the audio net. It's an audio over IP network that I use in my home studio, and so it passes all the audio that you would have normally with cables. It just passes them over Ethernet, and you can reroute things to lots of different functions and so on and so forth. And so anyway, so this has a Dante port on it, and then it also takes, you can have a mic loop through it. And what it does, I've had many of these. This is the smallest one I've ever bought. And the least expensive, which is very scary. Anyway, so
wow.
So this one was, I think, about $700 or $800. But what it does is you can program it to do a lot of different things. Now over Dante, I can have 3 sources and 3 inputs, and so I have my talk button, but I also have 2 talkbacks. So these talkbacks are so that if I have comms in the show, so I can hear other channels. So instead of just getting one channel in my ear from the headphone jack here, instead of having one channel, I can have 2 other channels going into my ear. And what's nice about that is that I could have a producer somewhere else talking to me about the show, and I can hear that, and I have independent control over the volume of what those are. So they're not mixed into my show audio; they're separate. So I can control the volume of each one of those. Also, I can set up things where if I push down talkback, it turns off my mic. So it makes sure that so you can set different ways for this to work together. So I can have some control over it, and but then so it's a lot more than a kind of a cough button. This is really an announcer panel, and you see a lot of these when we work in broadcast, high-end podcast studios for big companies and also for broadcast. You see a lot of Studio Technologies boxes like this. And again, I know this is a tiny one. I've had ones that have 3 or 4 of these buttons, and it's much bigger and does all analog. And what I was really kind of excited about is that it sits on Dante. So I'm slowly rewiring all of my office into a Behringer X32 that has lots of channels and processing, but it's all over Dante. I don't want to deal with all the cables. And so having just something over Dante that lets that work, do it. So that's what this is. It's the most geeky cough button ever. So
yes, indeed.
So anyway, it's pretty quiet. I can still hear it, but it's not too bad. So anyway, so that's so I'm in the process of remodeling my or just planning, and all the gear keeps on showing up, where I'm about to rebuild my studio, and so this, like, not this weekend, but probably another, like 2 weeks from now, I'm probably going to tear it apart and put it back together. You won't notice anything; it'll all look the same to you, but the front end for me will be completely changed as I work on it. That's just part one of the tools. Anyway, awesome. That's it. The Studio Technologies Model 205.
Well, thank you for that extra pick. I'm sorry I stole one from you for next week.
No, that's fine. I got
no. Don't apologize. You just saved Leo like $800 impulse buy next week, because it was really definitely going to happen.
Yep, you're absolutely right. I've got my Rolls mic switch here, which was $20. And so I'm okay. I don't need to buy the $800 one.
I'm just saying. And you could talk to John. You could talk to John on the back channel. You could do the back channel to John, telling him things that he needs to know, or he can talk to you, and you don't. You can.
And it's green accents. It's honestly, I'm pretty close. Yeah. Okay. Get him off the screen. Renee, tell me about your pick of the week, please. Hurry.
All right, so my pick of the week, we were talking previously, Andy was saying like he likes to support creators directly if they have a Patreon. That's always a great way. There's memberships on YouTube. There's all sorts of ways. One of my favorites is merch, just because you get to see creatives being really, really creative. And one of the things I picked up this week, because I'm always looking for new and fun ways to support people, is Sarah Dietschy's new Peachy AirPod case.
Whoa,
and it's hard to tell on this, but it's got a bunch of little peaches on it. And then it says, Stay Peachy on the back of it, which is just hella cute. You can get it in pink, you can get it in black. Marquez Brownlee, like if this is not your style, Marquez Brownlee has a case. He has a watch band now as well. I've got his Rubik's Cube, which even I can solve. It's just ridiculously easy for anybody who wants to get this right. But there's just there's t-shirts. Everybody always has t-shirts, but increasingly we're getting much more interesting stuff. Yes, iPhone cases are an obvious one, but AirPods cases and bobblehead figures. I don't know if I have it here, but they have, Alana Pierce has a bobblehead figure available now. It's just so much really cool and interesting stuff. So I love this. I love that I support creators directly. I love that they're working with companies to make really cool, interesting versions of the stuff that I'm going to use and buy anyway. So why not do it in a way that helps support them as well?
Yeah, that's awesome. Moment, reach out to me so we can create an olive green AirPods Pro case. I'm your guy.
The Mikah case.
Oh man, that's super cool. That's super cool. All right, Andy Anatko, tell me about your pick of the week.
It's kind of interesting that we were talking about subscription apps today, because I had the great example of why subscription apps sometimes work. Because my pick of the week is Adobe Lightroom Mobile, and especially because of the update they just pushed out a few days ago. This is when subscription apps work great. That's not just, you get to use the same app you've always been using, except for now you have to keep paying for it every single month. That's not an easy sell. What I am hoping for is that I'll get an experience like I've had with Lightroom, where just I'm taking a selfie in front of the Metropolitan Opera House. I don't have my full costume on. I have the civilian version of the clothes, none of the accessories that make the look, so to speak. And I'm about to post like a really, really happy selfie. Hey, I can't believe it. After 18, 20 months, I'm finally like in New York. I'm finally at the Metro Opera. I'm really, really happy. And I'm about to, and I maybe want to do a couple quick edits to it. I'm not an influencer. I don't want to make sure that I have that porcelain skin. Make sure that I have like the eyes like twice as big. Again, I'm not an influencer. I just want to look.
You are too.
I just want. I influence bad people to do worse things, but thank you, it's very kind. But what I'm getting at is I enjoy Lightroom on mobile because it allows you to do simple things that make into a better picture. And usually I'm talking about just simple things like, I want to sort of just get the background a little bit lighter, a little bit darker. So it was an overcast day, so I didn't really pop from the background a little bit. So open up Lightroom, say, by the way, there's an update with new features. Okay, fine, I've got time to kill. Update it with new features. The new features include these amazing amazing new object mask modes where now the simplest one, the most dramatic one, was that it uses AI and will basically, the kind of selfie I just took was, oh, I see there's a human being in front of something else. I could automatically create a mask for the human being. So if you want the human to be lighter or change the colors or change the detail, you can easily do that. And it's in beta. It took like about, maybe half a minute to download it and update it. But as soon as I did, without knowing anything about how it worked, there's obviously a quick little tutorial, but you just tap a button saying, select the foreground figure. And then here I am selected and all outlined in red. And then great, make this a little bit brighter. And I'm a little bit brighter. And I'm like, oh my God, this will save me so much time. And there are lots of other things they've done to it that would take me a long time and to be really, I get really, really enthusiastic about it and give you. And now in hour number 2, let me talk about how you can now subtract masks and layer masks. Just these simple things on a phone where, once again, you don't necessarily want to make this a studio-looking portrait. It's not that you're getting $100,000 for an ad placement, and so you want to make sure that whatever this is that you're mashing up against your face, like this is sponsored by Sony Battery. You want to make sure that you look as good as possible. But sometimes it's just like, gee, this could be a better photo. Gee, I really don't want to. But it's not worth the time to just mask off my entire body just to make it pop a little bit more. But in terms of like tapping on a new button that puts all the masking features, and then tapping on please select the foreground figure or please select the sky. Absolutely, sign me up. So this is why I continue to spend like $10 a month for Lightroom Mobile. It makes it. I keep saying that the most. I don't really have any games on my phones because the most fun app I have is Lightroom Mobile. Taking a snapshot, and in the time it takes for me to wait for my bus or the time that I'm taking on the commuter rail, trying to turn that into a real photograph just for the fun of it and just seeing what I can turn this thing into. And Lightroom Mobile really does it for me. But these new features just elevate what you can do on a phone, for God's sakes, to a much, much higher level.
Can I just add that, like, I took the Pixel Core course, and I learned from Alex Lindsay and everybody how to painstakingly composite your avatar, like take the background away and have like a perfect version of you with no background. And now, like, you press a button, a neural engine spins up, and exactly. It just does it better than you ever could.
And you feel
exactly
horrible because
the way we did it.
Yeah, you feel horrible because it's like now a lot of the presets in Lightroom and not so much Instagram, but in many apps, it's like, thank goodness I'll post it because I've just taken like an hour and a half to get this. I want to get the color grading correctly, and I want to get the light sources exactly how I want, and I want to maybe give it some more. And then I've taken again, my train is pulling to the station, so I hit send, and then like as I'm putting myself together, oh gee, I wonder what these presets do. Like, oh, that took a half a second, and it's like 10 times better than what I just spent 90 minutes.
There's a refined hair button now. Like yes. You press a button and it does the hair for you.
Reduce goofiness. Push that slider for me all the way to the right.
I'm always just amazed. I mean, I've been doing this long enough. I think all of us have been doing this long enough that you just are amazed at what's possible. When people complain about it, you're just like, it's going to space. Like, I mean, like, it's just like, you have no idea, like what we used to have to, it's a magical time. Like when I think about the photogrammetry and I just pick up my phone, and I'm like, oh, I want a 3D model of this. And I just wave my phone around. I mean, I did this in the 90s where I had to do it by hand. From photos. I had to build 3D models with boxes, and we'd figure out the parallax, and we'd do a thing. We didn't know what the lens, it was a thing. Like a block would take, I don't know how long to do. And now it's just like, oh, I wave my phone around it. I have a 3D model. It's amazing.
All right, folks. My pick this week is, so first of all, I gotta say, everybody pronounces this company's name differently. So I went to the actual YouTube of the company and listened to them say the name 1,000 times to make sure that we got it right. This is Satechi's latest adapter, and it's the USB-C hybrid adapter. And I mean, already on its own, I really like Satechi's products because they make a lot of great sort of color-matched and theme-matched products for your Apple devices. It's got USB-C on one side, and on the other side, you get an HDMI, you get 2 USB-A ports, and 1 power pass-through port. So I could plug this in, I could have HDMI out from an iPad, and I could also have 2 standard USB devices to plug into it. But that's not all this thing does. on the back of it is a little thing that pops open or closes. And inside, if I can pop it open, is space to drop in an SSD card. So I can, SSD drive. I can slot in
M.2.
an M.2 SSD drive.
But it's the SATA, right? It's or the SSD drive, not the NVMe.
That is correct. It does. Yes, it does not do the NVMe. So not
just
top
only
of the
because
line,
I'm just letting you know that if you try to force an NVMe into that space, it will work. It will go in with enough pressure. It just won't work. not that I've ever done that before. Not that
I was going to say that's
anymore.
good to know, maybe from experience. Yeah. So they show on the back of it, it plugged into a MacBook. So you could imagine, expanding your storage space if you want to, or passing this between different devices. I think you gentlemen were just talking last week about kind of one of the things with taking video on the iPhone is how long it takes to get it over to the MacBook afterward, or to the whatever computer you're using for it. Yeah, some ability to get that transferred faster is quite nice. I just think this is a super cool idea where you've got kind of an all-in-one device that makes it easy to move between different computers or devices, depending on if you're working on an iPad or your Mac itself. So I just plug that into the side, and it's good to go. Reswitz is asking in the Discord if it's Thunderbolt. No, it is USB-C. I'm not sure which version.
You can spend 3 times as much and get a Thunderbolt version if you want.
There you go. Yes, exactly. So this one is available for $90, and it's a nice svelte little adapter that has multiple USB ports, HDMI out, and that USB-C on the side. Again, SATA, not NVMe.
Sorry. Does it work if you don't have a storage card inside there? So can I buy it and then in the future decide in the future when I want to add like a terabyte to it, I can add to it?
That is a good question, and yes, you can use it without having to slot in storage. So that's kind of how I bought it. It's future proof.
$90 is not cheap, but it's such a. I would spend a little extra for this version to know that in the future I will have one less damn dongle, one damn less thing to plug in someplace.
Yeah, I think I recommended the Satechi, the base for the Mac Mini. That's very similar to that, except it just sits as a base underneath. It's formed around the Mac Mini, and I put the SATA drives in. First, I put one of the NVMe's in. then I learned that I should put the SATA drives in. So I was like, I just want to keep on saying that because I was like, I didn't even know there was another version of it because I build NVMe drives all the time, like little enclosures, for them all the time. So I just thought, it's an NVMe, and I ordered some more NVMe's, and it wasn't the same. So,
in fact, it's kind of funny on the back. If you look very closely at the photo, you can see that it's the Samsung 840 Evo or 860 Evo they have.
There's a version of both of those, and the problem is that on the one that's in the Satechi one, it still only has the one plastic pin instead of the 2 that the SATA. So the SATA has 2 plastic pins, but they're only using 1, and so that's why when I looked at it, I was like, it's NVMe, and so it's just a little, and it will fit with I just thought it was being difficult, so it did work, but it didn't work. I mean, it did eventually go, anyway, so
be mindful, folks.
Be mindful. It's SATA.
All right. That brings us to the end of this episode of Mac Break Weekly. Gentlemen, it has been a great pleasure joining you this week. Renee Ritchie, of course, people can head to youtube.com/Renee Ritchie to check out all your great work. But do you have anything else you want to pitch?
No, I got a bunch of stuff up there. I unboxed the Beats that we were talking about previously. I unboxed the orange HomePod. I just today unboxed the Hermes. I got to say it right, or people get really angry at me. The Hermes Apple Watch Series 7. So tons of fun stuff going up on there. And again, huge thanks again to Alex Lindsay for coming on and explaining the incredible detail, but incredibly approachable way, the difference between ProRes, H.264, H.265, and where and why you want to use all of them. It was aces.
Awesome. Speaking of Alex Lindsay, o90.media and officehours.global, what would you like to pitch, sir?
Yeah, I think that we're having a really good week in office hours. So if you're watching, you can always watch them on YouTube. So if you miss anything I just mentioned, you don't listen to Mac Break until the weekend or whatever. But tomorrow we're talking about USDZ. So we're going to break down how we just used USDZ to build a model and the pipeline that actually works. Because that's been a process to figure out. It's hundreds of hours of us. In 1 hour, we'll save you weeks of work if you decide you want to do that. We're also in this process of moving 090 to 4K HDR immersive with this giant engine that does the editing for us. That allows anybody to edit the show on an iPad or a web interface. And so on Thursday, we'll talk about how it's working and what's working, what's not working. It's complete open project. So we're just showing you exactly how the calculations are made and how we're using Isadora for this and Universe for that. And, we're tying into an ATEM and we're doing all this stuff. And it's really cool. So it's a really cool moment to watch what we're doing. And then Friday, we've got someone coming in from Zoom talking about events and conferences. And so we'll be doing that. And then, of course, Saturday, we have educators coming in. We've education on Saturday. We're cooking some spicy scrambled eggs, which should be really good. Ooh. And then we're going to Belfast for a concert. So we're virtually taking over a thing. So it's a very wide range of things that we're learning.
So something about the way that and Chef Tell will be coming in to show us how to make a spicy egg dish. It sounds like you're doing like a regional morning show now.
It is. What's funny is it's so
now the love
eclectic.
doctor will come in to find out how to put the spice back into your relationship this Thanksgiving.
Yeah. So it's amazing. We have Damyanti Gajar who's in South Africa, and she's showing us these Indian dishes from South Africa. And so we're doing these mixes, and so it's technically garam masala mix, and how to put that into and so we make it together. And what's interesting is we're finding, I really feel like we're in the beginning of like a new generation of cooking, because when you watch cooking on shows, they cut it all together so fast that you couldn't actually do it. It's really more of a passive experience. We're going at a speed where we're talking about it and we're doing it and we're figuring it all out, and everybody's got multiple cameras. So it's a different. There's only a handful of us doing it, but it's really a show. And I was talking to someone this morning about it, and they were like, I watch a lot of cooking shows, but I'm never tempted to actually try to cook them. And they were like, this one, I was like, oh, I think I could do that. It's much more approachable. And so, but what we're really doing is experimenting with. It's just an easy thing that everybody does that we can experiment with the idea of collaborative learning using Zoom. Like, how do we do that? A global collaborative learning project, and cooking is just the context for it right now. So anyway, yeah, it is funny though. When I list it off, I always realize how absurd our Saturdays are. So then we're going to Belfast for a concert where everyone takes over all the hardware from all over the world. So you've got one person calling the show in Boston, another one cutting it in Jamaica, another one, doing the literally running the lights over DMX from somewhere else in the world. And so it's a very eclectic day. We call it the long day because it starts at 5 a.m. in the morning and ends at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So anyway,
awesome. And of course, Andy, the Opera and Notco. When can folks find you or listen to you on WGBH Boston, and anything else you want to pitch?
I'm usually on Fridays. This week I'm on at noon. Go to WGBHnews.org and you can stream it live or come back a few hours afterward and they'll have the show posted. And usually my segment also broken out, and so you can listen to it later. I will say that, it's always great to have you as the host. Love speaking with you. Love doing anything with you. The one little thing is that so I did mention that I did have my new Pixel 6 Pro. Every time I have said like hey Mikah, it's assumed that it's hey Google, and so now I have so many little like snippets of like things that I have just said, like again, like here we are.
That is really interesting. Why my name?
Well, it's hey powerful. And then da the two staccato sort of. So perhaps. Also, maybe it's just that powerful. I don't know, or maybe it's just screwed up. Who knows?
One of those things.
Your name is a thrilling word, Mikah.
Exactly.
Thanks.
It gets everybody's attention, even digital assistants.
There you go. Well, I'll have to be very quiet with several digital assistants behind me listening. Folks, this is now the end of this episode of Mac Break Weekly. Thank you for tuning in this week. It is time for me to say, get back to work, because break time is over. Goodbye.
Have you ever read a tech news story and thought to yourself, man, I would love to talk to the person who wrote this to find out more information? Well, that's exactly what Mikah Sargent and I, Jason Howell, do each and every week on Tech News Weekly. We read the stories that matter to us, we reach out to the people making and breaking the tech news, and we invite them on to tell their story. And you can find it at twit.tv. Look for Tech News Weekly every Thursday.